Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
The whole thing started when our company decided to upgrade from an outdated paper-based customer tracking system to something digital. Management hired an expensive consulting firm to implement the new software, but once it was installed, they quickly realized they had no idea how to actually use it. That's where I came in. I spent months learning every corner of that system. I taught myself the proprietary scripting language, figured out how to create complex business rules, and even learned enough database management to optimize our workflows. Before long, I was saving the company over $200,000 annually because we didn't need to keep paying those external contractors every time we needed a simple configuration change. The system handles everything from customer onboarding to billing automation. I built scripts that automatically categorize incoming support tickets, created rules that flag high-value customers for priority treatment, and designed workflows that route different types of requests to the right departments. It took me 2 years to get everything running smoothly, but now it practically manages itself. My direct supervisor has always been supportive. She understands that what I do is specialized and valuable. But last Tuesday morning, everything changed. I arrived at my desk with my usual coffee, logged into my computer, and tried to access the system. Instead of the familiar dashboard, I got an error message. Access denied. Contact system administrator. I figured it was a glitch, so I called the Information Technology Help Desk. The tech who answered explained that my administrative access had been revoked that morning. When I asked who authorized this, he told me the order came from their department head and that I needed to speak with her directly. I hung up and immediately walked down to the Information Technology department. Their head, let's call her Karen because she absolutely fits the stereotype, was sitting in her glass office looking smug. When I confronted Karen about my removed access, she smugly explained that it was a matter of risk management. She claimed the board had decided that non-information technology personnel shouldn't have administrative access to critical systems. When I pressed her about which specific board members requested this, she dismissively told me it wasn't my concern and that the decision was final. I pointed out that I was the only person in the company who knew how to manage that system, handling all configurations, scripting, and business rules. Karen waved off my concerns, saying her team worked with JavaScript all the time and they'd figure it out. I tried to explain that this wasn't just JavaScript but a proprietary system with its own syntax and integration requirements that would take months to learn properly. She brushed this off and insisted they'd manage. I could see she wasn't budging, and honestly, the condescending way she dismissed my expertise really rubbed me the wrong way. Fine, if she wanted to play hardball, I could play too. I told Karen that if her team was taking over my responsibilities, I'd need to transfer everything properly to avoid delays or mistakes that could impact customers. She agreed this was very professional of me. I mentioned I'd have a comprehensive list of all tasks sent to her by end of business, and since she said there couldn't be any delays in turnaround times, I assumed her team was prepared to maintain the same service levels. She confidently said of course they were. I also noted that I'd still need to approve every change and configuration since I was ultimately responsible for the system's performance in my role. Karen agreed this seemed reasonable. I went back to my desk and spent the rest of the day creating the most detailed task list I'd ever written. Every single thing I do broken down by frequency and time requirements. The monthly customer data cleanup that takes 6 hours. The weekly automated report generation that requires manual verification and often needs adjustments. The quarterly system optimization that requires starting work at 6 a.m. because that's when server load is lowest. But the real deal was the daily stuff. Every morning I check system logs for errors. Every afternoon I review and approve automated processes. Throughout the day I handle urgent configuration requests from various departments. When I added it all up, it came to approximately 30 hours per week of work. I also made sure to include a note about meetings. Since Karen's team would be handling the technical implementation, they'd need to attend every meeting I have with other departments about system requirements, data needs, and process changes. I calculated that I attend about 8 hours of system-related meetings per week. The next morning, I sent the list to Karen with a copy to my supervisor and the department heads who rely on the system most. The subject line read, Information Technology Department, New Responsibilities Transfer. Within 20 minutes, my phone rang. Karen demanded we talk immediately and told me to come to her office right away. When I arrived, Karen looked significantly less smug than she had the day before. She had my list printed out and spread across her desk. Karen looked at the papers, questioning if 30 hours per week could really be correct. I confirmed it was accurate and reminded her that didn't include the time her team would need to spend learning the system initially, which I estimated would take at least 3 months of intensive training. She called 3 months ridiculous. I explained that I've been working with this system for 4 years and the learning curve was steep. Any mistakes her team made while learning could cost us customers or create compliance issues. When she asked about the 6 a.m. starts, I explained those were system maintenance windows when the server needed to be taken offline for updates, happening about 8 times per month during low user activity periods. She questioned why her team needed to attend all my meetings. I explained that if they were implementing technical changes, they needed to understand business requirements. I wasn't going to repeat every conversation or duplicate documentation because that would be inefficient. I watched Karen do some quick math in her head. Her information technology department operates on a tight budget, and they're always complaining about being overworked. Adding 30 hours per week of specialized work, plus meeting time, plus the learning curve, would probably require hiring at least one additional full-time employee. Karen suggested maybe they could work out some kind of compromise. I reminded her that she'd been very clear yesterday that this decision came from the board and wasn't up for discussion. I explained I was just trying to ensure a smooth transition with no impact on business operations. She asked me to wait while she made a phone call. I listened while she spoke to someone about the system access they'd discussed, admitting they may have been hasty and that they could probably manage the risk with proper oversight. After hanging up, Karen looked at me with barely concealed irritation and told me that my access would be restored within the hour. I asked if I should disregard the task transfer list, and she told me to disregard it completely. I cheerfully said I'd send out an email letting everyone know the transition had been cancelled. When I walked back to my office, I smiled. Karen's department operates under a completely separate budget from mine. Every hour they would have spent on my system would have been an hour they couldn't spend on their other projects. And knowing how they always complain about being understaffed and overworked, taking on 30 additional hours per week would have been impossible without significant budget increases. My access was restored exactly 47 minutes later. I tested it immediately and everything was back to normal. The next week, I received an email from Karen asking if I could provide basic training to one of her junior technicians, just in case. I replied that I'd be happy to set up a knowledge transfer session, but it would require approval from my supervisor and would need to be scheduled during business hours for additional training work. I never heard back about it. 3 months later, Karen's department submitted a budget request for 2 additional staff members. It was denied. Meanwhile, I got a nice bonus in my annual review for exceptional system management and cost savings initiatives. So, I'm 50 years old, and I've been married to my wife for almost 25 years. We decided to throw a huge vow renewal ceremony in December, basically like having our wedding all over again. The whole 9 yards with decorations, catering, the works. We have 7 kids together, and this story is about our youngest daughter who just turned 20. My daughter has been dating this guy for about 2 years. He seemed decent enough at first. He's polite, has a steady job, and my daughter seems happy with him. That's all I really cared about as a father. About 6 weeks before our vow renewal, he came to me with what I thought was a sweet gesture. He asked for my daughter's hand in marriage, which I appreciated since not many young men do that anymore. Then he asked if he could propose during our vow renewal ceremony. I thought it would be romantic, What better way to celebrate love than having two generations getting engaged and renewing vows on the same day? I said yes to both requests and was genuinely excited about it. Everything seemed perfect until about 3 weeks later when he approached me again. He started off casual, asking if he could invite some of his family members to the ceremony for the proposal. I told him that was fine and that I was expecting he'd want his parents and maybe a sibling or two there. That's when he handed me a piece of paper with 25 names on it. 25. I stared at the list, trying to process what I was seeing. I told him this was a lot of people and that our guest list was already pretty full. He responded that family was important and they all wanted to be there for this special moment. Here's the thing he conveniently left out. His family absolutely hates my daughter. They're Asian and have made it very clear they don't approve of their son dating a black woman. My daughter has told me about some of the things they've said to her, and while her boyfriend does defend her, it doesn't change the fact that his family treats her terribly. The thought of having 25 people who despise my daughter at what's supposed to be a celebration of love made my stomach turn. I decided to be honest with him about knowing his family doesn't approve of my daughter. I asked him why he would want them there for something that should be a happy moment. He said they would come around eventually and that this could be a good opportunity for them to see how much he loves her. But that wasn't even the biggest issue. See, our vow renewal is basically a full wedding. We're paying for everything: the venue, catering, flowers, music, photography. We budgeted for our existing guest list, and adding 25 more people would cost us thousands of dollars we didn't have set aside. I explained to him that I couldn't accommodate 25 additional guests. I told him the cost alone would be overwhelming, and frankly, I didn't think it was fair to my daughter to have people there who don't support her. That's when his whole attitude changed. His face went red and his voice got louder. He accused me of ruining his proposal over money and asked if I was serious. I tried to explain that it wasn't just about money, but about what was best for my daughter. He then said that if I really cared about her, I'd want her proposal to be perfect, and I'd want her future in-laws there to witness it. He called me selfish and said I didn't really care about her happiness at all. Here I was, trying to protect my daughter from people who had been nothing but cruel to her, and he was accusing me of not caring about her. Then he crossed a line. He told me he didn't need my permission, and that if his family just showed up, there was nothing I could do about it. I told him that there absolutely was something I could do. This was my event at my venue, and if they showed up uninvited, security would escort them out. He challenged me, asking if I would really dare to do that. I told him to try me. The conversation was getting heated, and I knew I had to make a decision. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. I told him he still had my permission to marry my daughter and that I thought they could be happy together. But I made it clear he wasn't proposing at my vow renewal ceremony and needed to find another time and place to do it. He asked if I was serious, and I said I was completely serious. The proposal was off the table. He stormed out of my house, slamming the door behind him. Within hours, I started getting phone calls, first from his parents, screaming at me in broken English about how I was disrespecting their family, then from two of my own sons telling me I was being unreasonable and should just pay for the extra guests to keep the peace. My oldest son called me that evening and told me I was making things too complicated. He said I should just pay for the extra people and get it over with. I tried to explain that it wasn't that simple, and these people had treated his sister horribly. He brushed off my concerns, saying it was just one day and that I could afford it. I told him that wasn't the point, but my other kids and my wife backed me up completely. My wife was actually angrier than I was about the whole situation. She said the audacity of this boy to demand we pay for people who hate our daughter was unbelievable. My second oldest daughter was equally supportive. She told me I did the right thing and asked why anyone would want people at their proposal who think they're not good enough for their son. A week later, my daughter's boyfriend had apparently been telling everyone that I was the unreasonable one, that I was trying to control their relationship and ruin their happiness. He painted himself as the victim in all of this. But here's what he didn't count on. My daughter isn't stupid. She started asking questions about why he seemed so stressed about the vow renewal ceremony. Eventually, she got the truth out of him about wanting to invite his family. My daughter came to me the next day and asked if he really wanted me to pay for 25 of his family members to come to our vow renewal. I said that he did. She then asked if these were the same family members who told him she was beneath him, and that he should find someone from his own culture. I nodded, and I could see the hurt and anger building in her eyes. She thanked me for protecting her and said she couldn't believe he would want people who hated her at what was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of her life. The next thing I knew, she was breaking up with him. She told him that if he couldn't see why having his racist family at her proposal was hurtful and wrong, then he wasn't ready to be her husband. She said she needed someone who would put her first, not someone who would expose her to people who treated her like garbage just to keep his family happy. He tried to backtrack and said he would propose somewhere else without his family, but the damage was done. My daughter realized that throughout their entire relationship, she had been compromising and accepting disrespect from his family while he did the bare minimum to defend her. The boyfriend kept calling and texting, trying to get back together. He even showed up at our house a few times, begging me to talk to her. I told him he made his choice when he prioritized his family's attendance over my daughter's comfort and dignity. His family actually had the nerve to call me and blame me for the breakup. His mother screamed that I had poisoned my daughter against them and ruined their son's happiness. I simply told her that her son ruined his own happiness by asking me to bankroll people who treated my daughter terribly. The vow renewal ceremony went off without a hitch. My daughter looked beautiful and seemed genuinely happy for the first time in months. She told me during the reception that she felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She said she didn't realize how much stress she had been carrying from constantly trying to prove herself worthy to people who would never accept her. About a month after the ceremony, I found out the real reason her ex-boyfriend was so insistent on having his family there. Apparently, his parents had been pressuring him to break up with my daughter for months. They thought if they all showed up to the proposal and made a scene or showed their disapproval publicly, it would embarrass him into calling off the engagement. His plan was to use our special day as a stage for his family's racism, and he expected me to pay for the privilege. When I think about how close we came to having our beautiful ceremony ruined by 25 people who wanted to humiliate my daughter, I get angry all over again. My daughter is doing great now, though. 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. I'm only 28, and it hit me like a truck. The doctor said I had good chances with chemotherapy, but that meant losing my hair. All of it. I had these long, curly brown locks that I'd grown out for years, and watching them fall out in clumps was devastating. My sister bought me a really nice wig to help me feel more like myself. It was expensive, made with real human hair, and styled to look almost exactly like my natural hair. When I wore it, I could almost forget about the cancer eating away at me. Almost. Today was my weekly blood test appointment at the hospital. These appointments were routine but necessary to monitor my white blood cell count during treatment. I always scheduled them early in the morning because the afternoons got crazy busy, and I was usually pretty tired from the chemo. I arrived at 7:30 a.m. sharp and checked in with the receptionist. The waiting room was mostly empty, just an elderly man reading a newspaper and a young mother with her baby. I took a seat near the window and pulled out my phone to scroll through social media while waiting for my name to be called. About 10 minutes later, this woman walked into the waiting room. She was probably in her 40s, wearing a handbag and expensive-looking clothes. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and she had this look on her face like the world owed her something. She walked straight up to the reception desk, ignoring the line that had formed behind an older woman who was trying to reschedule her appointment. Karen demanded to be seen immediately because she had a very important meeting at 9 a.m. The receptionist looked up patiently and explained that she would need to wait in line like everyone else. Once she checked in, they would get her scheduled based on her appointment time. Karen said that the receptionist didn't understand how busy she was. She complained about not wanting to wait around with all these sick people. I looked up at that comment. The elderly woman in line turned around with a shocked expression and reminded Karen that they all had appointments and were all waiting their turn. Karen snapped back that some of them had real jobs and real responsibilities. The receptionist maintained her professional composure and told Karen to please take a seat and wait for her name to be called, because that's how their system worked. Karen huffed and looked around the waiting room like she was surveying her kingdom. Her eyes landed on me, and for some reason she decided I was her target. She walked over and stood right in front of my chair and told me I looked perfectly healthy. She asked why I was even there. I looked up from my phone, confused, and asked her what she meant. She said I heard her and repeated that I was young and looked fine. She claimed that people like her with real health issues should go first. I told her I had cancer and was there for my weekly blood work. She looked me up and down and said she didn't believe me because I had a full head of hair. She asked if I thought she was stupid. My stomach dropped. I knew where this was going. I explained that it was a wig because I had lost my hair from chemotherapy. She rolled her eyes and said I was probably just some drug addict trying to get prescription medication. She claimed she had seen my type before. I felt my face getting hot. Other people in the waiting room were starting to stare. I told her I didn't want any trouble and was just there for my blood test. She said she didn't believe me for a second and that no cancer patient looked as healthy as I did. Before I could react, she reached out and grabbed my wig. In one swift motion, she yanked it right off my head. The waiting room went dead silent. I sat there completely bald, feeling more exposed and humiliated than I ever had in my life. My scalp was pale and had some scars from where they'd done the port insertion. Karen held up my wig like it was evidence and shouted that she had told everyone I was a fraud. She yelled that I was pretending to have cancer. Something inside me snapped. All the pain, all the fear, all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep since my diagnosis came flooding out. I stood up and slapped her across the face as hard as I could. I screamed at her about how she dared to touch me. The sound echoed through the waiting room. Karen stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek. She yelled that I can't hit her and threatened to call the police. She tried to lunge at me, but two nurses had already rushed out from the back. One nurse ordered Karen to step away from me right now, while another said that security was on the way and told her not to make things worse for herself. Karen was screaming that I had attacked her and hit her. She said she was just proving I was a liar. The elderly woman from the line had picked up my wig and gently handed it back to me. She said she was sorry that it had happened to me. I put the wig back on with shaking hands. I was crying, but I wasn't sure if it was from anger or embarrassment. Two security guards arrived within minutes and told Karen she needed to come with them. Karen protested that this was ridiculous and that she had done nothing wrong. She pointed out that I was the one who hit her. One of the nurses explained that they had cameras throughout the waiting room and had seen her attack me by removing my wig without consent. The security guard told her that she was being banned from the facility and would be arrested for trespassing if she returned. When they escorted Karen toward the exit, she kept yelling that this was discrimination and that she would sue all of them. She screamed that they can't treat her like this. Her voice faded when the doors closed behind them. The nurse who had been helping me knelt down beside my chair and asked if I was okay. She offered to help me file a police report. I told her I just wanted to get my blood drawn and go home. She said of course and promised they would take me back right away. She said sorry again for what had happened and told me that Karen would never be allowed back in the hospital. They took me straight back for my blood work, skipping the usual wait. The nurse who drew my blood was extra gentle and kept checking if I was comfortable. She told me she had watched the whole thing happen and said she couldn't believe someone would do that to a cancer patient. When I got home, I called my sister and told her everything. She was furious and wanted to drive to the hospital to find Karen, but I talked her out of it. The security footage would be enough if I decided to press charges. A week later, I got a call from the hospital administration. They wanted to follow up and make sure I was doing okay. They told me that Karen had actually tried to come back the next day, claiming she had been treated unfairly. Hospital security had to call the police to have her removed from the property. I started as a junior analyst in the finance department 5 years ago. Back then, our company was using this ancient system that nobody really understood. Every month, we'd pay external contractors thousands of dollars just to generate basic reports and make simple changes. The system was a nightmare. It required custom scripting in a weird hybrid of JavaScript and the system's own proprietary language. Most people took one look at it and ran the other way. But I've always been good with computers, and I found it kind of interesting. Like solving puzzles, my boss at the time was desperate. The contractors were charging us almost $50,000 a year, and they were slow. Simple changes took weeks because we had to submit tickets, wait for their availability, then go through multiple rounds of revisions. I volunteered to learn the system myself. It took me about 6 months of staying late and studying documentation, but eventually I figured it out. I could do in a few hours what the contractors took days to complete. My boss was thrilled. I got a promotion, a raise, and most importantly, full admin access to the system so I could make changes in real time. Over the next few years, I became the go-to person for anything related to this system. I built custom reports, automated processes, and saved the company massive amounts of money. I estimate I save us at least $200,000 annually by handling everything in-house. Then last Tuesday happened. I came into work like any other day, grabbed my coffee, and tried to log into the system. Access denied. I tried again thinking maybe I mistyped my password. Same thing. I called the help desk. The help desk guy apologized and told me my admin access had been revoked. When I asked why, he said he didn't have details, but the ticket mentioned something about security protocols and administrative access removal. He suggested I talk to my manager. I was confused and honestly pretty annoyed. I went straight to my manager's office and asked if she knew anything about information technology removing my system access. She looked just as surprised as I was and said she had no idea. She promised to make some calls to figure out what was going on. 20 minutes later, my manager came back looking frustrated. She explained that she'd just spoken with Karen from Information Technology, who told her about some board directive regarding security risks and limiting admin access across the company. When I asked how I was supposed to manage the system without access, my manager said she'd asked Karen the same question. Apparently, Karen's response was that all system changes would now have to go through her team. This was where things got interesting. See, Karen had been trying to get control of various systems across the company for months. She was one of those people who thought information technology should control everything computer-related, even if they didn't understand how it worked. I decided to go talk to her directly. When I found Karen in her office, I asked her to explain how this new process was going to work. She seemed pleased to explain that it was simple. Any changes I needed would require me to submit a ticket to her team, and they would implement everything. I asked if she or anyone on her team actually knew how this system worked. Karen got a bit defensive and reminded me that they were information technology professionals who could figure out any system. When I tried to explain that this system required very specific custom scripting and knowledge of complex business rules, she cut me off. Karen made it clear that the decision came from the top and was about risk management and proper controls. She said that there would be no more admin access for non-information technology staff, period. I could see she wasn't going to budge, and honestly, she had that smug look like she'd won some kind of victory. Fine. If that's how they wanted to play it, I'd give them exactly what they were asking for. I went back to my desk and started typing. I created the most comprehensive list I'd ever written. Every single task I handled for this system, no matter how small. Every report I generated, every script I maintained, every business rule I managed. I included time estimates for each task and noted which ones required early morning work starting at 6 in the morning. The list was 15 pages long. It detailed approximately 30 hours of work per week. I made sure to note that there could be no delays in turnaround time despite the extra step of going through their team. I also specified that I would still need to approve every single change and configuration since I was the only one who understood the business requirements. Then I wrote that Karen's team would need to attend every single meeting I had regarding the system or data because I wouldn't be repeating myself or duplicating my efforts. That meant sitting through boring budget meetings, quarterly reviews, and compliance discussions. I sent the email to Karen, copying my manager and Karen's manager. The subject line was simple: System Administration Tasks, Transfer to Information Technology Team. In the email, I wrote that I was happy to support the transition and looked forward to working with their team on maintaining the system. I mentioned that I'd compiled a comprehensive list of all responsibilities that would need to be transferred, along with time requirements and scheduling needs. I hit send and went to grab lunch. When I came back, my phone was ringing. It was Karen, and she sounded stressed. She asked if we could meet to discuss the list I'd sent. I told her I was available whenever was convenient for her team. The meeting happened within an hour. Karen sat across from me with a printed copy of my email, looking like she'd aged 5 years since our morning conversation. She asked if all these tasks were really necessary and if they truly took 30 hours per week. I confirmed that yes, everything on the list was essential for maintaining the system and keeping the company compliant with various regulations. I explained that the 30 hours was actually on the light side during busy periods like month-end and quarter-end reporting. Karen's manager was there too, and he looked uncomfortable when he asked about the budget implications. I helpfully explained that since his team would now be handling all this work, it would need to come out of his department's budget rather than mine. I mentioned that at current hourly rates for information technology staff, they were looking at about $60,000 in additional annual costs. The room got quiet. Karen asked if there was any way to streamline the process or reduce the workload. I shook my head and explained that these were all regulatory requirements and business-critical functions. There wasn't really any fat to trim. Then Karen's manager asked the question I'd been waiting for. He wanted to know what would happen if they decided to keep the current arrangement and restore my access. I pretended to think about it and said that would certainly be more efficient for everyone involved. Within 30 minutes of that meeting, I got a call from the help desk. My access had been restored. Karen sent a brief email explaining that, after further review, they had determined that the current system administration arrangement was the most effective approach for the organization. I never heard another word about security risks or board directives. Funny how quickly those concerns disappeared when faced with the reality of actually doing the work. 3 months later, Karen's department got their budget cut because they were overspending. Meanwhile, my manager made sure to highlight in her quarterly report how much money I saved the company by maintaining the system in-house. I ended up getting another raise and a bonus for my efficiency. I don't think Karen will be trying to take over any more systems anytime soon. The woman next door has been a problem since day one. About 6 months ago, things came to a head when I caught her kids trying to climb over our fence to use our pool without permission. When I confronted her about it, she went ballistic, screaming about how we were being selfish for not sharing our pool with the neighborhood kids. She actually had the nerve to say that since we didn't have kids of our own full-time, we should let hers use it whenever they wanted. The situation escalated when she started sending her kids over daily, and they began treating our backyard like their personal water park. They were leaving trash, breaking our pool equipment, and even bringing friends over. When I told them they needed to stop and that they were trespassing, she walked over and started yelling at me in my own yard. She threatened to call the police on me for being mean to children and said she'd make my life miserable if I didn't let her family use the pool. That was the last straw. I ended up taking her to court, and thankfully, the judge saw right through her entitled behavior. I won the case and got a restraining order against her and her kids. Her husband wasn't included because he'd always been decent to us and seemed embarrassed by his wife's behavior. Fast forward to last week. My husband and I have been planning a 2-week vacation, and I was discussing some of the details with one of my regular clients at the gym. I mentioned when we'd be leaving and some of the places we planned to visit. It was just normal conversation during our training session. A few days later, I was at the grocery store when I ran into the neighbor's husband. He approached me, looking uncomfortable, and asked if I had extra security cameras in my yard. I thought it was an odd question, so I asked him why he wanted to know. He looked around nervously and told me he needed to share something with me. He explained that his wife had a friend who went to my gym, and apparently this friend had overheard me talking about my vacation plans was my client. The friend had then gone back and told his wife all about our upcoming trip. I asked him what that had to do with security cameras, and he looked even more uncomfortable. He went on to explain that his wife had been trying to figure out exactly when we'd be leaving for our trip. She'd been watching our house and taking notes about our daily routines like some kind of stalker. The husband then revealed that he'd found an email his wife had left open on their computer. She'd been planning to have her sister and her kids stay with them during the time we'd be gone, and she told her sister they could use our driveway as their personal parking space. She was treating our private property like it was some kind of community parking lot. Even with a restraining order against her, this woman was still trying to find ways to mess with our property. The audacity was unreal. I asked him if she really thought she could just take over our driveway without any problems. He shook his head and said that's what he'd tried to tell her, but I knew how she was. He explained that she thought rules didn't apply to her, and kept saying that since we wouldn't be using the driveway anyway, what was the harm in letting her sister's family park there? I told him I really appreciated him giving me the heads up and that we actually did have security cameras pointed at the driveway. I made it very clear what would happen if anyone tried to park there without permission. I explained to him that he needed to tell his wife that if she or her sister tried to use our driveway, they'd be caught on camera. Their cars would be towed at their expense, and I'd have them arrested for trespassing. I reminded him that the restraining order was still in effect, and this would be a violation of it. He nodded quickly and said he'd definitely tell her. He apologized for the whole situation and said he'd tried talking sense into her, but she just didn't listen to anyone. I told him I understood he wasn't behind this scheme, but she needed to know I was serious about the problems that would come from this. I explained that we had a friend checking on the property while we were gone, and they had instructions to call the police and the tow company immediately if anyone parked in our driveway. The husband said he understood and that he'd make sure to get the message across to his wife. He was dreading that conversation, but honestly, that wasn't my problem. Before we left for our vacation, my husband and I made sure all our cars were parked in the driveway to make it look like we were still home. We also asked our friend to check on the house daily and specifically to watch for any unauthorized vehicles in our driveway. I gave our friend the number for the towing company and the local police station, along with copies of the restraining order in case they needed proof of the legal situation. I also made sure to let the husband know about our security setup one more time before we left, just to be clear about what would happen if his wife tried to follow through with her ridiculous plan. I told him I wanted to make sure there was no confusion about the fact that our driveway was private property, and anyone who parked there without permission would be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I emphasized that the cameras were recording everything, and we had people watching the house while we were away. He assured me he understood and promised he'd make sure his wife knew exactly what the problems would be. He seemed genuinely worried about what his wife might try to do, which told me he knew she was capable of being that stupid and entitled. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.